The problem that we have in white America is that most white people, when they hear about white racism, most white people say, man, that's not me. I never discriminated against anybody. Never did. In their sense of what discrimination means or what racism is, they may be right. But they sit residing in a system from which they take full benefit, a system that defines them in and defines black people out. We are going to have to face the fact that we are not a community. Community is where a lot of people develop mutually beneficial relationships with each other. And our racist institutions and the political boundaries of our cities define black people out of the community. White people sit in their suburban homes and watch your television programs and hear about all of these laws that are being passed. Many of them are beginning to wonder, what is it with those colored people on there? Why are they so upset? All this wonderful stuff that we're doing for them. But we aren't focusing on the black man living on the block. He lives in a two-flat on that block. And he knows what the circumstance on that block was 10 years ago. And he knows what it is today. And he, too, has heard about all of those programs and laws being passed. But the hard fact of the matter is that things are not changing for him. It's no wonder that the white population and the black population are pitted against each other when the black man knows that the change is not coming and the white man thinks that major efforts are being undertaken when they are not. So I don't think anybody should be surprised when one sees the black people in an open attack on the system, because I suspect that they don't see that there is any other realistic alternative.
Some of us came from close shot cavalry. Some people are stand up and rise. Some people are sit and cry.
What's happening? I guess how bias is catching up to America or something like that is going to be the title. But this video is basically, this conversation was right pretty much after the Civil Rights Act passed. So that concept of, oh, I've never been biased or racist, is BS, but it is what it is. But what I want to talk about is how it's catching up to America, because the bias, the racism, the prejudice, it put America in this up and down of capitalism. And what I mean is, you put black people on the outsides of America and all its benefits, right? So we have to figure out new avenues and ways to make a living, and it pioneered a lot of things. But what happened was, we would trailblaze a territory, they shut it down, repackage it, and now it's American, and it's in white American, and now Asian and Hispanic America can take advantage of it. So, but so that's how this stuff kept happening. When y'all think about the stereotype of black people in fried chicken, they're pretty much, even black people in barbecue, black people in restaurants in general. That's how you got all these fried chicken and barbecue restaurants all over America. That's how it's all on the menu. And Creole restaurants that are quote unquote Cajun restaurants. It was because black people had different restaurants, and white people quote unquote loved the food, and then they would try to go in business, and they would stab the people in the back, and then that's how you got Popeyes and Kentucky Fried Chicken, and now Wingstop and Chick-fil-A. It's all an amalgamation of that. Every barbecue restaurant and barbecue you see, from there to Chili's, it's from the same thing. That's just the food dynamic. When we talk about well, let me back up. That's with buffalo wings and buffalo sauce. You see how that goes. But Now, when I would talk about the EMS, workers, how that spawned from when people got sick, the police would come in a paddy wagon to pick you up. There was no ambulance. So, and when they came to black people, they might not come, right? So, black people created the EMS, the ambulance service, basically, and that's how that happened. And then all of a sudden, we got to, hit them with all type of red tape and bureaucracy and politics and racism, blah blah blah, and now shut it down. And now we got an EMS all over the country, and a ride and aid comes with a bill. So it's that. Um, you have, that was the same dynamic with even a light bulb and Lewis Latimer and plenty of a lot of black inventions. That's why the phrase "the real McCoy" came into play, because Elijah McCoy was the person who actually made it and patented it, and they just weren't able, and somehow they weren't able to steal his patent because they sold a lot of other people's patents. So he had to get paid from it. So that's how he had money. Now, um, going into not just redlining, what would you call it? Blockbusting, the what is it, the Highway Commission Act, whatever it is. I think it's the Highway Commission Act. You have black people, black business areas, because people think about Black Wall Street and the hundreds of towns that were burnt down, that Black America lived in, and all the riots and all that other stuff. But in even the towns that's burnt down, the ones that got flooded and became lakes, that's part of that whole destruction thing. But the Highway Commission Act doesn't get talked about enough because a lot of times it was black business areas, and you basically decided to run the highway through all the black parts of town, especially where people were having business transactions, and that was part of eminent domain. So you really didn't have to pay people; you just took their land or whatever, right? And you got to figure it out from there. There is no insurance for that. Even things when insurance was supposed to cover stuff, they didn't fully cover things. So that's a whole thing. And then what winds up happening is you create during in that process, part of Jim Crow, you create that dynamic where now that we got rid of your businesses because of the Highway Commission Act, now you got to come to our businesses, but we don't want you here. You know what I'm saying? So now you got to go to the back. You got to go around the back. You got to come in the back door. If you try something on, you got to pay for it because that was that same time period. That was what that was about. Uh, you fast forward, and people go, I'm. This whole time, people were saying, I'm not racist. Blah 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 blah. You know, maybe 10 years after this video interview, that's when hip hop was created, and it was supposed to be a fad and this, that, and the third, and it made too much money. And we see where that's at now. And people are trying to repackage it and rebrand it now. So because it's a capitalism issue, what I was going to get into, um, even with the hip hop issue, people talk about hip hop. It was founded in the Bronx. People forget how the Bronx looked in this late '70s, early '80s. It looked like it looked like a bomb got dropped on it. So people were like, "Oh, everybody lived there together." No, don't lie, don't lie. And I bring that up because from that point to even the '80s to the '90s, I remember when because my aunt was living in New York, and right before she left, that was when they were buying brownstones for $1 because of the crack epidemic, because of quote unquote the drug trade, Giuliani, all this, that, and the third. So the $1 million brownstones and $2 million brownstones and $4 million brownstones, they was going for $1 because it was a blighted area. And then people bought them, renovated them, and now you got to where you're at. And that's how you try to get rid of some people because The taxes is crazy. So that's a whole nother thing. And that's built into the equation. Um, a little bit past that era, during that time period, from 70s, I'm gonna go to the 90s. Um, that's when the HBCUs were really popping. And I went to two. I went to two. And from when the Cosby Show came, A Different World, the 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 the, the enrollment skyrocketed, and because 70s, but predominantly 80s and 90s, you started seeing more black people at PWIs because the sports were making a lot of money, and with that came we're gonna raise the price on tuition. These schools, they weren't always 20,000, 10,000, 20,000, $30,000 a semester or a year to go there. They weren't always like that. They couple of thousand, sometimes two, sometimes 2 to 5. I'll say that. But they kept raising the price because I don't want you people to afford going to college per se. And even with that, you had the incidents where they'll tell you, the HBCU education is not like the PWI education. But the truth be told, what happened was you had a lot of fraud in testing, had a lot of scamming like that. And somebody got caught like that recently. They're talking about it where they had these black medical students were passing, the what is it, LSAT, whatever the last exams are. And what they were doing was they would switch their tests with white students who were failing, who failed the test. So they got caught with that, which that's been a long-standing thing. Same thing with the bar and all that other stuff. That is a thing, that people don't talk about as much. But when he's talking about, it's built into the system, it's built into the system. And that's how you wind up with trash doctors and lawyers half the time. But and I say all that to say, even in business, you have those instances where black people go in business, they do all kinds of stuff and kind of red tape and bureaucracy to shut it down. Everybody else go in business. There's not, they can run that place into the ground and it could be a mess, and they pass all inspections and it's no big deal. And the vendors are not overcharging them and all that other stuff. But what wound up happening was all of that comes to a head because of capitalism. Like, that bias spilled into every community because now they got to overcharge everybody else. You get what I'm saying? Now the Hispanics gonna get overcharged, the Asians gonna get overcharged, the other white people gonna get overcharged. Everybody's gonna get overcharged because you systematically try to eliminate the black people out of the system, and you were overcharging them while you was eliminating them, and you don't want to go back to those days when you're taking less profit. You see that even insurance companies, medical companies, you see it all over the place. But so when people go, yeah, I've never done this and I've never done that, that's because it's already baked into the cake, and other people are starting to get affected by it. But I'm gonna leave it at that. Tell me what you think. Catch you on the next one. Peace.